Hey there, and welcome back for another Complete Aviation Solutions Deep Dive. This is number 17 for us. You know how this works. We take a deep dive into some of the most interesting things happening in the world of aviation. Today, we're going to be looking at how one airline is trying to grow like crazy, even with all the supply chain problems that everyone's been talking about.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting case study. We're looking at FlyaDeal. They're a low-cost carrier over in Saudi Arabia, and they want to more than double the size of their fleet in the next 5 to 6 years.
More than double. That's right. The article we're looking at is titled Supply Chain Issues, No Barrier to Growth at Saudi's FlyaDeal.
I gotta say, this is super interesting to me because you always hear about these supply chain problems, especially with something as complex as aircraft parts. So how is FlyaDeal going to go from 41 aircraft to 102 with all of these problems? Well, their CEO, Stephen Greenway, he's pretty open about how this rapid expansion is going to put a huge strain on their business. And the article even points out that they're expecting some serious bottlenecks, especially when it comes to engines and essential cabin equipment, like seats and galleys.
I can only imagine what a logistical nightmare that must be. Trying to outfit over 60 new planes, but everybody's fighting over the same limited resources. It's like trying to bake a cake, but half the ingredients are missing and everyone else is raiding the pantry.
That is a perfect analogy. But to their credit, FlyaDeal isn't just waiting around and hoping for the best. They're facing these challenges head on with a few key strategies.
All right, lay it on me. What's their secret?
Well, there's no magic bullet, but they are being pretty smart about it. One of their tactics is they're using what they call off-the-shelf cabin equipment instead of custom-designed interiors. That way they can avoid those long lead times that are hurting so many other airlines.
Makes sense. Why wait months for a custom-made oven when you can just buy one off the shelf and get to baking? But I would imagine that comes with its own set of challenges.
Right. It does make you wonder how FlyDeal is going to be able to set themselves apart and, create a unique experience for passengers if they're using more generic equipment.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a trade-offs they're willing to make, at least for now. So what else are they doing to keep those new planes coming in?
Well, they're really stressing the importance of good relationships with their outsourcing partners. It's not about getting special treatment. It's more about open communication and working together to solve problems so that they can have a smoother and more reliable supply chain.
So it's not just about who you know, it's about how well you can all work together, especially when things get tough. It's like a well-coordinated dance team. Everyone has to be in sync to nail those complicated moves.
Exactly. And this proactive approach seems to be working. They're still on track to add about one new aircraft every month to hit that target of 102.
Wow, that's a bold move considering everything that's going on. Makes you wonder what kind of planes we're talking about here. I mean, you can't just pick up a jumbo jet at the corner store, can you?
Well, if you look at their current fleet, it gives you some clues. Right now, they've got 11 A320-200s. Those are like the classic workhorse for those short, medium haul flights. And then they've got 27 A320-200Ns, the newer, more fuel-efficient version. Plus, they're leasing 3 A330s. Those are those bigger, wide-body aircraft you see on longer routes.
Okay, so they've got a mix of those single-aisle and wide-body jets. It sounds like they're planning to expand both domestically and internationally.
You got it. And their order book backs that up. They've got orders for 16 more A320-200Ns, plus a big order for 39 A321-200Ns. Those are the stretched versions of the A320 with more capacity. And there's even talk that they're about to place an order for 10 A330-900Ns to really boost their long-haul operations.
Wow, those are some serious numbers. Looks like they're going all in on the wide-body market. But I am curious why they're sticking with Airbus for both their narrow-body and wide-body fleets. Wouldn't it make more sense to diversify a little bit, especially with all the supply chain issues we've been talking about?
That's a really good question. It might seem a little counterintuitive, but there are a few reasons why having an all Airbus fleet could be a good thing in this situation. Well, for one thing, sticking with just one manufacturer can make maintenance and training a lot simpler. And that can save them some money. And you can't forget about those bulk discounts they might be getting with those big orders.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like buying in bulk at the grocery store. You get a better deal if you stick with one brand, so they're streamlining their operations and potentially saving some cash. But where are they planning on flying all these planes? What's their route strategy?
Well, right now they're flying to 28 airports. Across a pretty wide area, they've got a strong presence in their home market of Saudi Arabia. But they're also flying to places in the Middle East, Pakistan, Turkey, and even Uzbekistan.
Okay, so a mix of regional and international routes. It sounds like they're trying to tap into different markets, both business and leisure travelers. Pretty smart move, especially with Saudi Arabia trying to become a big tourist destination.
Right, and that brings us to the bigger picture. FlyIdeal's big growth plan is actually part of something much bigger, Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 plan.
Oh yeah, that plan to totally transform the country's economy and reduce their reliance on oil. I remember reading about their goals to boost tourism and make Saudi Arabia a global transportation hub.
That's it. And FlyaDeal, since they're part of the Saudi group, is playing a big role in that vision. Their expansion fits in perfectly with the government's goals, and they're basically paving the way for more people to come and visit Saudi Arabia.
So it's not just about FlyDeal's success, it's about helping the whole country transform its economy. That adds another layer of complexity to this whole thing, and honestly, it's pretty exciting. But let's zoom out even further. What does FlyDeal's growth tell us about the bigger trends in the aviation industry, especially when it comes to low-cost carriers?
Well, it really highlights a couple of key things. First, we're seeing the continued rise of low-cost carriers all over the world. People are looking for affordable fares, and they don't mind skipping some of the frills. And these low-cost carriers are often the fastest-growing part of the market.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. It seems like every time I look up flight prices, there's a new budget airline popping up, offering crazy cheap fares to places I never even thought about visiting.
Exactly. And there are a few reasons for this surge in low-cost travel. You've got rising incomes in those emerging economies. Plus, people are starting to value experiences over material things. And then you can't forget about how technology has made it so much easier to compare prices and book flights.
So it's like a perfect storm for low-cost carriers. But wait, you said there were two key things. What's the other one?
Oh, right. The other trend is that there's more and more competition between low-cost carriers. As more airlines enter the market, airlines like FlyDeal have to find ways to stand out and attract customers.
Classic supply and demand. More options for travelers, but more pressure on airlines to offer competitive fares and services. So how's FlyAdeal handling this increasingly crowded market?
That's a great question, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, their big expansion, their focus on strategic partnerships, and how they're aligned with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. That's all part of their plan to carve out a solid position in this competitive market. They're not just reacting, they're trying to shape their own future.
It's like they're playing 4D chess or something, thinking several moves ahead and figuring out how everything they do is going to affect the industry. Pretty exciting sense. But I can't help but wonder about the risks involved in this kind of rapid growth.
Well, one obvious risk is that they could overextend themselves. If they grow too fast without having the infrastructure or the operational efficiency to keep up, they could end up with service disruptions, unhappy customers, and even financial problems.
The classic growing pains. You try to scale up too fast and things start to break down. But I guess that's the risk you take with any ambitious venture.
Absolutely. And then there's always the chance of something unexpected happening, like an economic downturn, some kind of geopolitical event, or even another pandemic. Any of those things could throw a wrench in their plans.
It's a good reminder that no matter how well you plan, you can't control everything. So FlyDeal has to be flexible, ready to change their strategy if they need to.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. We're watching a high-stakes experiment play out in real time. Will their gamble work out, or will they run into too many problems? We'll have to keep an eye on them.
It's like watching someone walk a tightrope. You're on the edge of your seat hoping they make it to the other side. But you know there's a real chance they could fall. Speaking of risks, what does all this mean for the average traveler? How will FlyAdeal's expansion and these bigger trends in the low-cost carrier market change the way we fly?
Well, I think we can expect to see airfares continue to go down. As competition gets tougher, airlines are going to be fighting for passengers with lower and lower prices.
Now that's something I like to hear. Who doesn't love a good deal when it comes to travel? But what about the actual experience of flying? If airlines are cutting costs, will the quality of service go down?
Yeah, that's a valid concern I think a lot of people have. Will cheaper fares mean we have to give up some comfort and good service?
Yeah. Will we?
It is a trade-off. Low-cost carriers usually put efficiency ahead of luxury. Think things like less legroom, no free meals, and you might even have to pay extra for things like checking your bags or picking your seat.
So you're saying it's all about managing your expectations, you get a cheaper ticket, but you might have to give up some of those perks that you're used to when you fly.
Exactly. It really comes down to what's important to you as a traveler. Do you care more about getting a direct flight or having a free snack? Are you willing to pack light so you don't have to pay for bags? Those are the kind of choices you face with low-cost travel.
It's about being smart and deciding what you're okay with giving up. But thinking back to FlyAdeal's route map, all those 28 airports in different countries, I wonder if they're choosing where to fly. I mean, it can't just be random, can it?
Oh, definitely not. Route planning is a huge deal for low-cost carriers. They're picking their destinations very carefully. They need places with a lot of demand, airports with low landing fees, and the right-size planes to match how many passengers they expect. All of that helps them keep those fares low and stay competitive.
So it's a complicated balancing act. Growing the airline while keeping things efficient, keeping costs down, and finding those sweet spots in the market.
Right. And then you've got that extra layer of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 to think about. Their expansion plans are tied in with the country's goal of becoming a global hub for travel and tourism.
Wow, it's incredible how all these pieces fit together. Global supply chains, ambitious national plans, the ups and downs of the airline industry. It's all connected in this one story.
It shows just how interconnected the world really is. A decision made by an airline in Saudi Arabia can have ripple effects all over the place, impacting suppliers, other airlines, and travelers around the world.
Yeah, it makes you think about those unintended consequences. It's almost like the butterfly effect, but with airplanes.
Exactly. And that leads us to a question for you, our listener, thinking about everything we've talked about: the supply chain problems, the intense competition, those ambitious growth plans. What do you think this all means for the airline industry in the long run? And for travelers like you?
Will we see even lower fares, more places to fly, or will all these challenges lead to something totally different? It's a question worth thinking about as we try to make sense of this ever-changing industry.
It's definitely a wild time for aviation, full of uncertainty, but also full of opportunity. And like always, the most exciting part is waiting to see what happens next.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into FlyaDeal and what their story tells us about the future of low-cost air travel. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, safe travels. CCO.